Welcome to Peak Providers NDIS podcast. My name is Chris Hall, your host, and today I've got Anita from TechAbility with me. What we're going to talk about today is saving money and saving time in the NDIS through IT strategy. Now, Anita is a lady that's very unique because she has got the expertise to give you a holistic, broad, as well as in-depth view of the relevant IT solution for you as a provider. Now, in terms of her background, she is the CEO and founder of TechAbility. She's got over 20 years of experience in IT, having worked in various roles in financial services and also risk management before moving into that sector. She's worked with everyone from government, education, retail, social enterprises, and also not-for-profit. And after 10 years of being an experienced IT professional, she decided to bring all of those years of experience and set up a for-purpose organization helping out providers in the NDIS, notably, again, TechAbility. So, Anita, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris.
It's really a pleasure to have you on. Anita, It was Brendan that introduced us, and he said, "Oh, you've got to meet Anita," because I think he saw two fellow IT people that were kind of two peas in a pod with a history working in that sector. He very much recommended with high regards what you do at TechAbility. So it's great to have you on.
Thank you.
Yeah. So look, I mean, just for the benefit of the audience, like we've got people that are obviously providers here. A lot of people in the NDIS are often new to business, right? So that I'd say that's at least 70% of the time. So they can have people that are new to business, but also sometimes newer to IT solutions, right? So like for you and I, as former professionals, well, you're still a professional IT, but you know what I mean, working in corporate, so to speak, I'm all about that, and I'm a bit of a inner geek, I'll say. So for those that kind of like are segueing into the NDIS and maybe they don't have a background, in the tech world, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that face NDIS providers that specifically can be solved through IT solutions?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of providers, what I hear from a lot of providers is the excessive amount of administration that they need to do in their day-to-day operations for running their business. They're in business because probably they want to care for people. That's why they get into the business. But they find that the amount of manual workarounds and manual effort that they're required to do. Their systems maybe don't talk to each other. If they do already have some systems, they're not talking to each other, having to duplicate a lot of information across various systems. So I think that's probably the key thing, is that the excess of administration work that they need to do. And I think that can be solved. I know that can be solved through IT solutions, through the better IT solutions.
Yeah, exactly. And it all depends. You got to think about business like basically a workflow from left to right. And so it always starts off with sales and marketing, which is what I help people with. And that'll be should we say, the spearhead of things. Like it means nothing unless you've got an inquiry, right? So one way or another, that could be an incoming phone call, an email campaign, an advert. Either way, we're getting some kind of a referral from a party, whether that be the support coordinator, the participant, the nominee, etc. And I suppose like you've got the sales and marketing stage, which is a huge discussion in itself, but then you've got that, what I'll call the hot lead stage. So what I mean by a hot lead is someone's actually willing to present all of their information from a referral. When I say a client referral form, I'm saying you're at the stage where you want to tell me your NDIS number, who your GP is, what your allergies are, what your disabilities are. Like, in my own business, just out of transparency, I've put in place things like Jotform before. And Jotform is an example of an online web form. You can customize whatever field you want. And even just doing what I would think is the basic of a referral form, it was 100 fields. Once you actually diligently go through all of that, that's a lot of data that, I suppose an example of a workaround would be Jotform can give me a PDF, but then what if that needs to go into my rostering system with all the relevant information, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, you've already captured all this great information if you're using an online form, or in some cases paper forms, you've captured all this information. If it's in an online form, you want it to actually then transfer across to what you're going to use as your system to manage the client ongoing and to manage your rostering around that and your claiming and your billing. So that information is not lost and has to be re-entered somewhere else. That's one of the sort of those heavy administration type burdens where you find that a lot of organizations are capturing this information and then having to re-enter it into multiple different systems.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose, like, even you touched on it there, the paper versus paperless journey, because, I was a director of a place where it was so common that pieces of paper were what was happening at the houses because it was a SIL provider. And, we had a mixture of some cool systems and other things. We're like, wait a minute, we've got Microsoft Office 365 and we have the ability to put, even if we didn't sign up to a fancy system, we've got the ability as part of a subscription to put a SharePoint in place. And that SharePoint can be used collaboratively between employees, and we can upload photos of the doctor visit paperwork, or go online and update a stool chart or whatever PRN register needed to be done. It could be done digitally from your mobile phone. So suppose, like, would you agree that a lot of providers don't always know sometimes almost the free option that's in front of them sometimes? Is it like with Microsoft and Google?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I see it every single day, people underutilizing what they've already got in their organization, whether it's something as simple as Microsoft Suite, which has, I couldn't even tell you how many apps are in Microsoft Suite. There's probably 20 or more different applications within the Microsoft Suite. As you say, can be utilized across the organization. It's all cloud-based these days. Everyone can access it on their phone, on their iPad, when they're in the office. It can be accessed and shared across the whole organization. And those applications within the Microsoft Suite also talk to each other. So, if you're capturing information files in SharePoint, that can be accessed through Teams, and you can have conversations and chats around that. You can do planning. You can add in a planner tool in Teams. And, so there's lots of ways to actually use the tools that you've already got. And even in some larger organizations, I see that they've spent an awful amount of money on huge systems that cost a lot of money, but they're still underutilizing what they have in their systems, and they're still using paper forms, or they're sticking band-aids on things saying, oh, well, we can't do rostering very well, so we'll stick another rostering system in.
Right.
You had rostering in that other system, so why are you adding another rostering system? Yes. It happens all the time.
Right. And of course, that's where, people like yourselves and your business comes in, because you help see through all of the distortion and the noise and and all of the mistakes in terms of double entry or manual workarounds, and it kind of make a clearing through the woods. It's interesting. It's got to be fit for purpose. It's got to be appropriate to scale. Like, again, there's going to be solutions that work for the solopreneur style of, just starting up. There's the midpoint, small to mediums, and there's the tens of millions, 100 million providers. Like it does matter, of course, the size. But I mean, even, since yes, there is an administrative burden, but we've got the practice standards, we've got to do it. Like, a very quick mention of Microsoft again. Like, I really liked using the automatic transcription of Microsoft Teams, because it meant that as a general manager meeting, we could prove to our auditors automatically that we'd taken minutes of our meetings, because all we did is activate that one setting which said, yes, automatically transcribe, which is just a written, form, a written document, sorry. That's brilliant, because the auditors were like, oh my God, this is fantastic. What was the date of the meeting? What exactly did you say? Sure, click here.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I see that a lot too, like maybe some slightly larger organizations, not always large, but who have boards, and they've got a whole board who maybe they're going off using some other tool, or maybe they've got someone manually taking minutes of meetings and manually managing all of their board papers and things, where they're already using Microsoft Suite. They could be actually utilizing a SharePoint site, a Teams channel where that information is captured. Their meetings are all set up and established, and their minutes are all done within the system. So yeah, that happens a lot.
And I'm gonna call, because I'm a coach and I work with hundreds of providers. Like one risky endeavor I've seen time and time again also is customized development. So what I mean by that is you can get an enthusiastic entrepreneur through their enthusiasm and their vision and their ideas, which is a wonderful strength to have, to be able to go like, wow, we could build a system, we could do it, build our own system. But then often as a coach, what I witness from third party looking in is that they'll spend 30, 40, 50 grand even more, getting their programmer, right, to put together the system. And you think, my gosh, if you'd only taken that 30, 40 grand and got yourself a subscription with fill in the blank, you could have got that for $5,000 a year or something. Like, do you have a perspective on that? Like, I'm sure it's kind of a complex discussion as when do you do custom build of a solution versus getting something off the shelf and customizing it?
Yeah, well, having a background in product management and software development as well, I know how hard it is actually to develop your own systems. It's not just the development. They may spend $30,000, $40,000 on a developer to actually build it. It needs ongoing support. It needs ongoing administration. If you don't have the resources internally to manage that, then you're forever going to have to pay those additional costs. And I come across that a lot where people have built out their own platforms, and it might be on an established platform like a Dynamics or Salesforce or something like that, but they don't factor in the additional development and ongoing administration of that. And then what if that person who has that set of skills leaves the organization, and then you don't have that skill set in the organization anymore? You again have to outsource to a very expensive developer. I kind of think that that's why there are so many client management systems in this space. There are over 60, by my count and counting, over 60 systems that are NDIS platforms in one way or another for different sort of segments of the market. But there are so many out there, and I think that people have gone out there and developed their own and then thought, oh, we'll make this a product now, we'll sell it to other people. Right. Therefore, we've got all of these systems out there now.
Right. And you've got to be careful of that. Now, the thing is that, there will be times where there is a business case to do your own thing, but I would go out on a limb and say 80% of the time, it might be wise not to develop your own system, and to go to something that's already built. But when you go to something that's built, one of the things that, on your note there about people have built, lots of different specific functions. Like, one thing I look out for is, do you have a good knowledge bank library? So you should be able to, in my opinion, enter into Google any kind of problem that you want to do in that system, and then they should have some kind of a knowledge bank is like where you can, for people who don't know, you can have an online library where you can type in, how do I do blah 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 in the system, and it will have the exact question that you're asking, the solution, the little video guide, and the pictures, and they open here, do this, press this. Like, would you agree that amongst many other factors, like having a good, like, available how-to guide for the actual system is an important thing to consider?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, when we back to your point about steering away from developing your own system, I'm with you on that. I've heard that from many people over the years, and I do steer them away from it because there is so much additional work involved in that. And there are so many systems already out there. So why go build your own? I could have done that when I started my business, build another one of them, but I didn't go down that path because I saw there were so many systems out there in the first place. And I think when you are looking at those systems and the options that you have available, out of all of those systems, you need to narrow that down to what your requirements are. What does your business need out of a system? You need to then go through, aside from the features and the functionality of the system, you also need to go through that due diligence to look at, important aspects like security and things like that, but also what kind of training is available, what kind of support is available. It's just as important as the features and functions is how you're actually going to be supported with that platform.
Exactly. Now, if we talk about the what I'll call the verticals of business, and when I say that, I'll mean the sales and marketing process, human resources, accounting, the billing within the NDIS process, and other functions. I don't think I've mentioned rostering yet. So rostering, all these different types of function, right, in business. And what from your point of view, in an NDIS context, what are the main verticals like that NDIS focused IT solutions add value to?
Yeah, I've got a really nice little diagram which I can share with you later about this. But yeah, so there's 8 sort of verticals, if you like, which sounds like a lot. and I would say that this is probably scalable, that there are certain systems that can do that can cross over. So you would have obviously your client management, your client information, your engagement with your clients, somewhere where you can actually capture support plans, goals, tasks, activities that you need to do with your clients, staff management, so staff information, what skills do my staff have, who can they support in the organisation, the rostering, the timesheets, very important, obviously. Then you've got things like documents, and workflows. So information, other documents and information, your service agreements and your support plans and reports and things like that need to be captured. Policies, procedures, that's obviously part of NDIS registration. You need to have somewhere where all of your policies and procedures are documented, are shared with your team members. Then you've got financials, so your invoicing, claiming, payroll, financial reporting, and then of course quality and compliance. So again, back to that sort of policy point, is that you need to actually be managing all of those risks. When the auditors come in, you need to have all that information somewhere that's available, that they can see that you're following the guidelines. And then of course reporting. So there's sort of 8 key kind of verticals, if you like. A lot of those can be done across systems. So you might find a really good client management system will have a lot of those aspects built in. Again, scalability, you've got to work out as a small business, are you going to go with this big system that can do everything? But for larger organizations, probably where they've got the money to spend on a bigger system, a good client management system will have a lot of those aspects. You could probably get away with having a client management system, a finance system, and of course your Microsoft suite. And that may be all you need. As you grow, you might need to get a separate HR system or something like that, or a quality system. So I think, when you start to scale up, you need to include other functionality. You need to add to the functionality. If business is growing, you may be doing different services, offering different services. What suits you as a sole trader or a small business is not necessarily going to suit you once you grow. So you need to obviously review those systems over time, make sure your systems are talking to each other. Really important that you're not having systems that are just, again, goes back to that duplication of information, having to manually enter things from one system to another because they don't talk to each other.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Love the overview. Thank you. I mean, so for example, when you said staff management software, you helped my mind shift away from just rostering in a good way. I was like, it's always thought about, rostering, you have your rostering system. But staff management, of course, is not just about rostering. Like there are solutions out there that can, within the same system, have an integration about things such as first aid certificates, right? Because, because in principle, one should not be putting a member of staff that has an expired certificate on a shift, right? So some systems actually can give you that hard error where you're not allowed to go on a shift unless your certificate's been updated. And then in addition to that, of course, you can have workflows to remind both staff and management that the first aid certificate is coming up for expiration, right? So yeah, it's not thank you. You helped me go like, it's so not just rostering, because rostering is that function, what I just said, and of course exporting to essentially the billing and payroll function. How do we collect money as providers and how do we pay our staff, which needs to be done very well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's that compliance that you need around your staff members, around things like that, certifications, also capturing things like just preferences,
Yes.
And some of the really good systems out there will have the ability to identify the client's preferences. Maybe this client speaks a certain language, maybe they prefer female workers or whatever it is, or also that they may need someone who has skills in pig feed or epilepsy management, or certain skill sets. So you can identify what the client needs, what the staff members have, what skills they have. And then when you're doing the rostering, it can match those people up and say, okay, these are the right staff members for this client. So it's a little more than just rostering. It's sort of capturing all those certifications, all those skill sets, and making sure that you're finding the right fit for your clients.
Well, absolutely right. And that's a great example. And let me just throw one final other thought into that one. You've also got where the person lives and where the client is, right? You know, because some providers work across, I'd call them, should we say, hubs of excellence, right? So you got, hey, the Sydney CBD hub, the Western Sydneyers, the South, you know, the Wollongong hub, you pick a hub, you know, in around Australia. The point is that most workers aren't willing to go more than 30 minutes in terms of traveling to a shift. So, you know, that's highly relevant to have that up-to-date information so they can go, this is as well as the skill set and the training, this person, you know, can go there too. The other thought that I have around that is that you made me realize that, you know, I also have an education background. And so I think about learning and development and training and having a learning plan, you know, for an employee. So that can link to a learning management system and the courses on there that you've got. But again, a good example of information flow would be if, you know, these 10 members of staff don't have any manual handling training, then maybe we need to do 3 things. Maybe we need to do an online course that verifies they get the concept of manual handling. Maybe they need to go to an in-person manual handling thing. And then finally, that information should only be updated inside of essentially this rostering arena once they have once they've got the manual handling tick against their file, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really great point. And on that point about the location, the other important point there is it's not just the worker getting to client A, who's their next client, you know, so they've then got to get from client A to client B. You don't want them having to drive, you know, 100 kilometers to the next client. That's wasting time, you know. So you need to, that's another sort of really great way of using the rostering functionality and using the data that you have in your systems to make sure that you're doing, you know, it's the most efficient way of rostering and scheduling and utilizing your staff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, this again comes to the scaling point. So the good and exciting news for NDIS providers from a business point of view is that if you do a good job, you can go from 0 to 50 staff in a matter of 1 to 2 years. I see that all the time. So that's the exciting news as a business owner, right? But then this whole IT strategy thing, the level of focus that is necessary as you scale is crucial, right? So just as a quick shout out to you know, a company that we collaborate with is PayCat. You know, and there's lots of different solutions out there, but PayCat's a great example of a solution that will pick up every element of the SHADS award in terms of, say, the split shift. Well, here's your $18 because you did a split shift, or, you know, you did overtime. Well, you got a meal allowance, and it will pick up based on the timesheet data a much more accurate expression of the SHADS award, so that basically you're avoiding a fair work claim. You know, that's how serious it can become, and it's very real, isn't it, when you're going from 50 to 100 to 200 staff?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and also making sure that you're, you know, we've got this sort of 2-hour minimum rostering. You've got other factors like their contract states that they're doing X amount of hours per fortnight or whatever the case is. So you've got to manage all of that as well. So and integrating, you know, that information, your rostering information with your payroll, equally important. You know, a lot of these sort of client management systems aren't going to do your payroll. Some of them have got some award interpretation built in, which can be useful, but it's generally just information that then gets sent off to the payroll system. So it's not sort of totally doing your award interpretation. It's adding the guidelines in there around the award, and then handing that off to a payroll system.
Yes, exactly. And then again, like when you think about money and, you know, what it might cost, like one of my favorite systems holistically is like conceptually, is the idea that you can start as a small provider and then grow with it. So, you know, if, say, for example, if something costs, you know, $6 per employee per month to do your payroll. And you go, my God, $6 per employee. You know, like you could go, oh, that's a lot of money because I got 50. But then when you start having the mindset of, but I'm paying my payroll person $60 an hour to do the payroll run or something, and they're not spending 2 hours on this anymore. They're spending 10 minutes maximum per employee because they're just doing a sense check because the system's done it for them. That's a cool example of it scales business case wise, and it also genuinely should save you money, shouldn't it, financially, because it's taking the human error and the human labor out of things.
Yeah, absolutely. When I do IT strategies for organizations, we look at all of that. You know, you look at, okay, you're currently doing this very manually. You know, you've got all of these extra sort of bodies there doing the work. You're paying them, you know, as you say, like 60 grand a year or whatever their wage is, as opposed to putting a system in that's going to do this, and maybe you're going to spend $20,000-$30,000 a year on that system. Well, that's half a wage. You know, it's not saying that you necessarily have to cut people, you know, from the back office. You may be able to reutilize them. You may be able to do things a lot better. You know, you're becoming more efficient rather than just cutting staff. But yeah, it's certainly a factor. Like, people do tend to look at, okay, that's just dollars per user. You know, I've got all these casual staff and I'm having to pay them, you know, buy a Microsoft license for them, plus, you know, the client management system license, plus a payroll license, and, you know, all these different things. They just see it as dollars, as cost of the employee. I mean, that is the total cost of employment. But you need to factor in where you're saving as well from the effort that's happening in the back office.
Correct. Okay. Well, look, I want to try and stay away from specific systems because I know that, like, you know, it's such an in-depth conversation, isn't it? Let's go macro for a second and talk about the industry, right? So we have the new PACE system, PACE, coming out. What's your opinion and take on that?
Well, it's a good question. Not an easy one to answer because I don't yet have a lot of experience with it, because it's really just starting to roll out. So it's rolled out obviously in Tasmania. I don't think completely, but it's rolled out to some people in Tasmania and a few other areas. But I'm keeping tabs on it, keeping tabs on what's going on with it. And I just attended a session on that the other day, actually. They had a bit of an update session for providers, which I sat in on. I mean, I think at its core, they're implementing a new system because they need to implement a new system. Like, at its core, it's a government department putting a new system in because they have to. They're moving to the new Salesforce-based platform. The old system was on a SAP platform and has been around for a long time, and obviously they've received lots of feedback and negative comments around that platform. So they're moving to something that they see as being, I think, more pliable. Salesforce is a much more customizable platform, so they can do a lot more with it, which is a wise move. It's also highly integratable, so, you know, a lot of other platforms can plug into it. So that's, you know, a really good advantage. In terms of the benefits for providers, the aim of it is to reduce the administrative overheads, which is great. I can't tell you if that's working or not yet, but that's the aim, that's the goal. And I mean, they're going to have, obviously, there's new features like being able to not having to create service bookings anymore, which, you know, that's one tick, not having to do that for a lot of providers, removing the need for single claims, doing all claims via bulk upload, a apparently simpler provider portal. Anyone who's used Proto will appreciate that.
Well, one that actually works would be nice. The provider portal could be a little what's the word? It doesn't. It doesn't not always. It doesn't
temperamental.
Always, temperamental. Sorry, thank you. You knew the word I was trying to search for there. I was struggling. Thank you. It's temperamental. And you go, wait a minute. Why can't I edit? It's not doing anything. It's just going in circles. You know.
Yeah, exactly. I think one that's up and live consistently will be great for a start. But they're sort of saying that you'll be able to view participants' plans and budgets in there, process your claims, submit reports, things like that. So it should be a lot more usable. I mean, I've used Salesforce platforms over the years plenty of times, so I know it's a highly usable system from an end user perspective. So I would think that it is going to provide a lot of improvements. The project is rolling out very slowly, and I think that's not such a bad thing, because I think they need to do it well, and taking the time to do it properly, and the way that they're doing it in rolling it out across a small region to start with, and certain provider groups. I think that's a sensible approach. We don't have really a timeline. Even the update I went to the other day didn't really give a definitive timeline as to when it would be completely rolled out. I wouldn't be holding your breath. I think we'll be living with Proda for a while yet, most of us.
Well, I know how these projects go. Yeah, so that sounds like it could be years away, honestly, in terms of the mass market.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of said to someone who kind of said, "Oh, maybe we should hold off on doing something until PACE is live," and I'm like, "Well, that could be like 2025, really." I reckon that's probably when we're likely to see it fully rolled out. I haven't seen them publish any dates as such, but a project like this across such a large sector, I think will take quite some time.
Agreed, very much so. Let's wind it back to the basics again and say, let's imagine we're a new NDIS provider and we're just starting out. If you had to pick only one IT system, and let me just put aside Microsoft and Google Workspace for a second, because everyone sort of needs an email address, right? If we put those aside, what would be the one system, if you could only pick one, what would be like the one type of system that you would suggest is the most crucial thing to start with as a provider?
Well, I was going to say, Microsoft. I was going to say, or not, I'm saying Microsoft, but Microsoft, Google, it's your choice where you head with that. But most people use Microsoft. The first thing people, I think, should do is get a domain name.
True, yes.
A proper domain name. And there's nothing worse than seeing a professional, a business email come from a Gmail account, gmail.com. I think it's so unprofessional. So a professional business domain and a proper business productivity platform like Microsoft, Google, I think is absolutely essential. Number one thing that you should be doing. But in terms of systems, specific industry-based systems, a client management system without doubt is the key thing that you need. You need somewhere that you can actually keep your information on your clients, and you need to be able to map that through to rostering. If you do rostering, depends on the type of business, of course, but you need to be able to actually run your business. And the client management systems in this space really they're fit for purpose for the industry. They're all built specifically, most of them, I said all, but probably, a small percentage of them have been, CRM platforms that have been tweaked. They're built for the industry. They do everything that you need. Obviously you're going to have to identify the right system, the right client management system. And you don't need to go out there and, as a startup, you don't need to go out there and get the biggest, best, top of the range system. Some of these systems cost a bomb. Like you can't, as a startup, do that. There are some really great, simple, quite cost-effective systems out there that can do what you need now. And then you can grow with it, over time. I said it before, over time, you need to review that as you scale and you grow, to make sure that your systems are keeping up with your business.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned let's bring together Microsoft example, Office 365, and the client management stuff. Because here's a question I've got for you. It's common as an NDIS provider to get a lot of referral information, like we talked about, and then it ultimately needs to end up in a living document of a care plan or support plan, same thing. Now, there's lots of pieces of information that ultimately get there, and you can either just type it up, or you can get fancy and bring data in and all that stuff. Is there? I personally, for a startup perspective, I get attracted to the idea of literally just using Office 365, whether it be SharePoints, things like that, having those care plans in there. Like, where I know that you can do that as an approach to client management, but where do you, if you don't have any other systems beyond Microsoft Office, where do you start hitting your head against the ceiling to therefore start needing a client management, piece of dedicated software?
I think once you get to sort of, well, again, depends a little bit on the type of work you're doing, the type of services that you're delivering. If you're a, support coordinator or something like that, where you don't have a lot of other staff, you're not doing rostering, things like that, it's doable, in a Microsoft type platform. If you're having to manage staff, you're having to manage rostering,
yep.
Houses, if you're doing housing services, things like that, that's where I think, and I think when you get to the point you've got a few staff, that's where you start to realize this isn't going to work. Just, sharing information across emails and Teams and SharePoint, that's where you start to sort of run into those challenges.
Agreed.
So yeah, really it's once you've got a few staff on, you can manage those things. If it's small, if you're keeping it under, say, 5 or something like that, it's quite easy to manage. But once you start to, grow past that and you're having to do things like the rostering and staff management, that's where it's going to cause problems and make life a lot harder.
Absolutely right. And then again, I couldn't agree more on the types of services. Another example would be if you're doing therapies, like say physio or speech therapy, OT, you're going to need essentially like a booking system, as well as having the client management information in one go. There's lots of systems for that. But I used to work in tourism, so I had a Segway business doing the little scooter tours, and I couldn't live without my booking system. There's no way I could have done that manually.
I've got one myself. I actually, but I just use Microsoft Bookings. So there's a Microsoft app for that. So I just use, I used to use Calendly because that was what was around. And then Microsoft came up with Microsoft Bookings. I'm like, oh, good. That's part of what I'm already paying for. Why am I going to have another system? So I love a good booking system.
Now, I've come across when I was meeting you for the first time, we've talked about I think there's like an online survey tool that people can fill in to kind of get some guidance from your business about the types of systems that could be right for them. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it works?
Yeah, so well, I've been doing this for almost 5 years now. So and really, when I first started out, that was number one question. People were always asking me, "Oh, what software can we use?" So over that time, I built up a lot of information around the 60 plus systems out there in the market. So all of that information, all that IP that we had, I sort of developed a database of that information, and I thought, well, maybe I should make this a little easier for people. Instead of having to pay my consulting fees, they can do it themselves. So we built an online questionnaire. So basically they sign up for it online through our website and they fill in the questionnaire. So there's a lot of really key questions around, what type of business. So that's one of the key questions, what type of services you provide, how big you are, how many staff you have, all that kind of thing. And then the really key thing is what features you need out of a system. So we've got a huge list of different features and functions that are common in these type of systems. It's not all, there are always some exceptions, but the common features and functions that we find in these types of systems. So they fill in that, they prioritize that list of requirements basically and say, this is what we need. This is essential. This is maybe nice to have or whatever it is. Yep. And then that submit that and it does a comparison of what they've input into the questionnaire against our database. And then it comes out with a report of the top 5 best matched systems for what they need. So, and they get a report, so lovely report with a whole heap of other information. So they get a report with the top 5 systems, a bit of information about those systems, and then some other general information about how to go about finding the best system, some tips on how to choose the right system for them.
That's invaluable. Well, we'll make sure to put a link to that in the product, is in the show notes, sorry, so people can have a look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah,
I
great.
guess a final couple of questions that I'd have is that, systems fundamentally are a data repository that have workflows and they connect things together, and they do wonderful functions, right? Now, amongst all of the great things they can do, my more philosophical question is, does it even great systems, do they fundamentally rely on a very competent, driven, and diligent human being, behind them in order to drive the system?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're no matter what system, no matter what industry, really, you need people to drive the systems. And I mean, in this industry, it's a person-focused industry. It's a person-focused field of work. So there's always a need for humans. We're never going to get rid of that. In terms of systems, though, you're always going to need back office staff to be managing the client information and their budgets and processing billing and managing the payroll, and even the service delivery people. They're going to need to provide feedback. They're going to need the information on their client. They're going to have to provide feedback on their client, what their progress is, what their support needs are, anything that's changed, any incidents. So there's always a need for people behind the systems. I think the key really about the systems is that they aim to reduce those menial administration tasks as much as possible. So if you can find a good system that's actually going to reduce all that, administration in the background, let people get on with what they do best, then, that's really the goal. And I think you're right, in what you say there about, having the right skills. I think what we find is that, when someone starts out in this business, they start for all the right reasons. They're well-intentioned and they want to run a business, a disability support business, because they care. That's what they want to do. We find that they're not always the most tech-savvy people. Sometimes, but not always the most tech-savvy people. So I think if that sounds familiar, then maybe your next hire needs to be someone who's tech savvy, someone who can actually support your business and manage your systems, manage your processes and your systems.
There's definitely that need to have the ability to, even if one isn't tech savvy, I would say tech competent, in terms of as soon as you hear the complaints about I don't know how to open an email or to upload a document or whatever, that's a huge training issue. You got to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the other little splash of distinction I'll put in there is that one of the things I do outside of sales and marketing is I'm a Gallup strengths coach, and that goes into the psychometrics of things, i.e., or should I say the psychology. It tells you how you think, how you feel, how you behave. And that's something I'm going to be bringing to the NDIS market more broadly, because when you can get inside the psychology of a human's mind, you can literally understand their motivations and their interests. And so put it like this, Anita, if you can combine the competent, tech savvy person that's your CV level of skill with that underlying behavior of diligence or analytical thinking or whatever it is that's necessary for that role and that system to combine, that's when I think you get the sweet spot. Because a lot of people, they're not interested in that, and they don't want to, to do that level of thinking or it's just boring to them, so they won't do it. But the right psychology will be like, no, that's very important. I have to do that. Therefore, brilliant marriage with the system as well.
Yeah, I think I find that a lot too. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm terrible with technology." I hear that all the time. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think, I find people, a lot of times people will say that. And then as I work with them, I find, no, you're actually pretty good at this. You are actually quite competent. Once they know how, once they know what the systems can do or how to use them. So I think it is, as you say, it's not something that they're interested in. They're not interested in knowing or learning, but if they're shown how to do things, then I think a lot of people can be competent with technology, So, yeah.
Absolutely.
And of
So,
course, there's people like us that can support you. So
well, honestly, that's why I couldn't
yeah,
recommend people to come to you enough, because it's when I used to be in IT, I described myself as a translator, and so we literally had offshore development teams that were coders doing programming, and I was the
yeah,
client-facing person that would go, "Tell me what you need," and I'd then work with the programmers literally. So I think when you're a good IT consultant, you can translate what someone's saying in business terms to a system map. It's kind of the
yeah.
same thing, right? Um,
Yeah, exactly. And that, I mean, that's, I probably would describe myself as the same and always have been, is that I've always been that person in the middle,
yep.
translating the techie into the what everyone can understand.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, we find, as businesses grow, they need to sort of, when you're first starting out, it's not reasonable to have a dedicated IT person internally. Like that's
Yeah.
that's not feasible in in a small organization. But once they get to a certain size, maybe once they get to say maybe 50 to 100 staff, like that may be a reasonable expense for them to have. But that's where until that point, you lean on people with that expertise, and it doesn't have to be as expensive. It's not going to be as expensive as hiring an IT person in.
Mm-mm.
You outsource your managed service, IT managed services to say manage your network and manage your computers and the day-to-day techie stuff, and then use people like us, consultants and other organizations, to help with implementing your software or providing that advice around what's the right systems and the right way of doing things. And I mean, until you get to the point where you do have to hire someone internally, you may still, as you grow, need to lean on some consultants from time to time. I work with organizations that are, hundreds of staff, because they may have an IT person, but maybe that IT person is great at fixing the computers and getting someone set up and things like that, but they may not have a strategic view and understand how things can hang together. And I guess that's where we come in.
It is system level thinking, without a doubt. Love it, but literally, and that sounds like a cliche in saying that. I'm sorry, that was a bit of a pun, but yeah, systems level thinking about systems. Now, I guess my final question would be, what are the upcoming trends in the next 12 months within the NDIS that providers needs to be aware of from a technological point of view?
Well, we all know that PACE is coming, but we'll just have to wait for that one. So,
Yep.
So PACE is obviously something to kind of keep your eye on, stay on top of. They are running regular sessions and talking about it. So, make sure that you sort of keep ahead of when that change is going to come, because I think they will gradually roll it out region by region. I think for me, in terms of systems and things, I don't think there's a huge change. There's still lots of systems out there, and I would hope that maybe some of them will sort of dwindle away, because I think there's too many.
Okay.
Some of the maybe not as popular ones might just dwindle away over time. There's a lot of systems, and I think that confuses a lot of people. A lot of NDIS providers still go, "Oh, there's so many, I don't know what's the right one." For me, I think the biggest concern at the moment, for any business, let alone not just NDIS, for any business really, is cybersecurity. We've all obviously seen and heard in the news about huge cyber attacks from large organizations, but this is not something that just affects large organizations. It's it's across the board. Small businesses are impacted all of the time, and it's the kind of thing that can just sink your business immediately if you have a cyber attack. So I think it's a really important area for any business, including small businesses, to address. In the May budget, thankfully though, in the May budget, the government did announce that they are going to provide some funding for small businesses. We're thinking probably some sort of grants around helping people to understand cyber threats and train people in-house to manage cyber threats. So that's good. That's positive. The government is also going to be making changes to the Privacy Act. That's something that's coming. It's, they're talking about it a lot, and we're probably looking at something that's going to be a minimum standard. So we're going to have some sort of minimum standard or certification against that. We're not sure what it's going to look like yet, but they're talking about it, that it's going to be something that will impact and be rolled out across critical sectors. And that would definitely hit, health, aged care, disability would be part of that. So
yes.
I think it's something that people really need to be very mindful of. And when you're starting out, keeping that, in the back of your mind when you're thinking about any systems, is thinking about cybersecurity, thinking about, the systems you're using, the measures that you have in place. Even with your Microsoft platform, you can't just rely on it's Microsoft, it's not going to be hacked. Of course it's going to be hacked. It's hacked all the time. So you need to be mindful of making sure that you've got all the right security measures in place with all of your systems. And it's not just your systems, it's, there's other things as well. There's human factors. There's a lot of human factors involved in cybersecurity. So really making sure that people are educated in terms of information security.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. No, I agree with that very much so. Yeah.
I think probably on the bright side, I'm really I'm really interested and watching artificial intelligence and how that's going to impact the industry. It's really exciting.
Yes.
It's still very it still seems very new. But I've seen some people like doing some fun things with ChatGPT,
yes.
Helping to write support plans. I know personally through people I know personally writing care impact statements through ChatGPT, things like that. So there's some really interesting times ahead, I think, and it'll be really cool to see how that might play a part in our industry.
Oh, it is. I teach people about AI in my marketing masterclass, and ChatGPT, along with about 3 other AI tools. I combine them together to look at copy, video, voiceover artistry done by AI, and imagery. Like it is already changing things for without a doubt. I think on the AI side, basically there's an opportunity to get on that wave and ride the wave. And if you do it in this over the rest of 2023, then for providers there's an opportunity to get ahead. Because I still think in 2024 and 2025 there's going to be people that are not yet embracing it and go, oh, what's that thing? Just like if people say, oh, I'm not good with computers, there's always going to be people that are going to be saying that about the AI factor. But honestly, I think having an attitude of embracing it is what can set you ahead as a provider. But I agree with you on those points as well, of course. That's really interesting on the Privacy Act and of course cybersecurity. Right, brilliant. Well, look, Anita, we're coming up on time. Thank you so much. Anita Gover here is from TechAbility, and what we'll do is we'll make sure to put a link to her business again in the show notes. But Anita, thank you so much for coming on today. It really has been a pleasure having a chat with you.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's been really good to chat.
Absolute pleasure. And once again, my name is Chris Hall. This is Peak Provider NDIS Podcast. If you're interested in expanding your business through sales and marketing, get in touch with us as well at peakprovider.com.au.